Beyond the blinding neon of modern metropolises lies a silent realm where time stands still, unbowed by the frantic pace of the present. This is not merely a geographic expedition, it is an intimate encounter with the enduring soul of a 10,000-year civilization. In these hidden corners, the veil between towering peaks and ancient legends thins until it vanishes completely. We invite you to step across that threshold and witness a world where the line between reality and myth dissolves forever. Welcome to the deep, haunting, and beautiful mystery of China. Where that ancient memory takes physical form, it rises here at Tianmen Mountain, in the heart of Zhangjiajie. Begin with the cable car. At over 7,500 meters in length, it holds the record as the longest passenger cable car system in the world. As the cabin climbs, the city of Zhangjiajie shrinks beneath you until it vanishes entirely, swallowed by cloud and distance. What replaces it is something that no photograph fully prepares you for: a labyrinth of sandstone pillars rising from deep valleys, wrapped in mist, ancient and completely indifferent to human scale. At the summit, 999 stone steps ascend toward Tianmen Cave, the Gate of Heaven. The number itself is deliberate. In Chinese tradition, 9 represents the highest reach of heaven, and here, every step carries that intention. Climbers arrive breathless, not only from exertion, but from the growing awareness that the sky is no longer above them, it surrounds them. Tianmen Cave is a natural arch, 131 meters tall and 57 meters wide, punched clean through the mountain by geological forces acting over hundreds of millions of years. Filmmakers have used this location to represent other worlds, and standing inside it, that instinct makes complete sense. The arch does not frame the sky. It becomes a doorway into it, one that has stood open, waiting, for longer than any civilization on Earth. That doorway leads not always upward into stone and sky. Sometimes it opens outward, onto water and stillness, and an entirely different kind of wonder. Erhai Lake sits in the Dali Valley of Yunnan Province, stretching 42 kilometers from north to south like a ribbon of jade laid gently across the land. Where Tianmen Mountain demands everything from the body, every breath, every step, Erhai asks only that you slow down and look. The surface of the lake shifts through the day from deep emerald in morning shadow to brilliant turquoise under afternoon sun, mirroring the sky so precisely that the horizon between water and air becomes difficult to locate. This is the homeland of the Bai people, one of China's oldest ethnic communities, whose presence in this valley stretches back more than 3,000 years. Their architecture is immediately recognizable: white-walled houses trimmed in dark gray tile, every exterior surface painted with elaborate murals depicting flowers, birds, and scenes from Bai mythology. These are not decorations. They are records, passed from generation to generation on the walls of living homes. The Bai have long understood something that modern travel culture is only beginning to rediscover: that a place reveals itself slowly. Travelers who circle the lake by bicycle, stopping at fishing villages and ancient temples along the shore, consistently report that the experience reshapes their sense of time itself. Erhai is not a destination that overwhelms. It is one that quietly and permanently stays with you the way a piece of silk holds the memory of the hand that once carried it. That silk ribbon across Erhai Lake is one kind of human achievement, patient, generational, woven over centuries. But China also builds in ways that defy the laws of what seems physically possible. Zhangjiajie Bridge crosses Diheng Canyon in Hunan Province, suspended between two mountain peaks with nothing beneath it but empty air, and a valley floor 330 meters below. What makes this structure extraordinary is precisely what it lacks. There are no towers rising from the canyon floor, no intermediate supports of any kind. The entire weight of the bridge, thousands of tons of steel, hangs from just two main cables stretched between the cliff tops on either side. Before Zhangjiajie existed, crossing this valley required 30 minutes of navigating dangerous mountain roads. Today, the same distance takes exactly 1 minute. To pull the initial guide cables across the chasm during construction, engineers had no ground access whatsoever. Helicopters carried the first steel lines through open air above the canyon, a maneuver that engineers described as 4 years of aerial engineering performed at the edge of what machinery and human nerve can sustain. That single minute across Zhangjiajie Canyon compresses something profound, the gap between what nature divides and what human will connects. And to understand why China builds with such determination, you must first understand what this land gave its people and what it demanded in return. China covers 6 million square kilometers, making it the third largest country on Earth by land area. home to more than 1.4 billion people, representing dozens of distinct ethnic groups and languages. But long before those numbers existed, before dynasties rose and fell, before any wall was built or any bridge was dreamed of, there were two rivers. The Yellow River Huang. He carries soil so dense with mineral sediment that its waters run the color of clay. For more than 6,000 years, its annual floods deposited some of the most fertile agricultural land on Earth across the North China Plain, feeding the earliest settled communities of Chinese civilization. Ancient texts called it the Mother River. The name was not metaphorical. It was acknowledgement of a biological fact that the food, the water, and ultimately the culture of an entire people flowed from this single source. Further south, the Yangtze River, the longest river in Asia at over 6,300 kilometers, created a second cradle, warmer and wetter, supporting rice cultivation that would eventually feed hundreds of millions. Together, these two rivers did not merely water a civilization, they wrote its first chapter, carved its first boundaries, and established the agricultural rhythm that Chinese society has never entirely abandoned. Those two rivers did not only feed the body. What grew along their banks, over thousands of years, was something more difficult to measure: a system of thought that would shape how hundreds of millions of people understand their place in the world. Chinese civilization developed not around a single religious doctrine, but around three philosophical currents that flow simultaneously through everyday life. Confucianism established the architecture of human relationships, the obligations between parent and child, ruler and subject, teacher and student. It did not demand worship. It demanded conduct. For more than 2,000 years, its core principle of filial piety, the deep, practiced respect for parents and ancestors, has functioned less like a rule and more like a gravitational force, shaping family structure across generations without requiring enforcement. Taoism moves in the opposite direction, away from social structure and toward nature itself. Where Confucianism builds order, Taoism dissolves it, asking instead that a person align with the rhythms of the natural world, rather than impose upon them. Buddhism arrived from India and found in China a culture already prepared to receive its central insight that stillness is not emptiness, but depth. In the mountain monasteries of China, these three streams converge. Monks rise before dawn. Bells mark the hours. The air carries the smell of incense and pine. Time does not stop in these places, but it slows to a frequency that the modern world has nearly forgotten how to hear. To sit in one of these courtyards, surrounded by mountains that existed before any philosophy was named, is to understand why Chinese culture has endured every force that history has sent against it. That stillness found in mountain monasteries was never guaranteed. It had to be defended. And nothing in human history represents that defense more completely than what was built along the northern edge of China's world. Drive an hour north from Beijing, and the city dissolves behind you, its glass towers and ring roads replaced by ridgelines that grow progressively sharper and more remote. Then, without warning, it appears. The Great Wall of China does not announce itself gradually. It simply exists, suddenly, across the top of a mountain range. Stretching in both directions until it disappears into haze. The full structure runs more than 21,000 kilometers across northern China, built and rebuilt across multiple dynasties, spanning nearly 2,000 years. At its widest sections, the wall measures enough across its top surface to allow 5 horses to ride abreast. Watchtowers rise at regular intervals, each one designed as a self-contained defensive position capable of housing soldiers, storing weapons, and transmitting smoke signals across hundreds of kilometers within hours. What the stones do not show is the human cost beneath them. Historical records and modern archaeological analysis suggest that hundreds of thousands of workers, soldiers, peasants, and prisoners died during construction phases, many buried within the wall's foundations. They worked through winters that dropped temperatures far below freezing, across terrain where supply lines barely functioned. The wall ultimately failed at its military purpose. Armies found ways around it, but as a monument to collective human endurance to the capacity of a civilization to mobilize millions of lives toward a single, almost incomprehensible intention, it has never been surpassed, and in the silence of its highest, most remote sections, that weight is felt in every stone beneath your feet. That weight of history and sacrifice carried in the Great Wall eventually finds its counterbalance not in more stone, but in silence, in elevation. And in the ancient human need to reach towards something beyond the physical world. Wutai Mountain in Shanxi province rises as 5 distinct flat-topped peaks, each one a natural plateau suspended above the surrounding landscape. Collectively forming one of the 4 sacred Buddhist mountains of China. The name itself means 5-terrace mountain, and from a distance, the peaks do resemble 5 open palms held upward toward the sky. A gesture of offering that the mountain appears to have held for millions of years. Buddhist tradition identifies Wutai as the earthly residence of Manjushri, the bodhisattva of wisdom. And for more than 15 centuries, that belief has drawn scholars, monks, and pilgrims from across Asia, from Tibet, Mongolia, Japan, and Korea. All arriving at the same high altitude in search of the same quality of understanding that cannot be found at lower elevations. More than 50 monasteries occupy the mountain complex, some dating back over 1,000 years. The air at these heights carries a permanent coolness regardless of season, and the sound that defines Wutai is not wind or water, but bells layered. Overlapping tones that move through the morning mist and seem to arrive from no single direction. Scholars who have studied here for decades describe the mountain not as a place they chose, but as a place that called them and never quite released them afterward. That calling from Wutai Mountain speaks to the soul through stillness and wisdom. But China's sacred peaks do not all ask for contemplation. Some demand something far more primal: courage, physical commitment, and a direct confrontation with the limits of what the human body is willing to do. Huashan, one of China's 5 sacred Taoist mountains, does not resemble a mountain in any conventional sense. Its 5 peaks rise from the Qinling Range in Shaanxi Province as near vertical granite faces, sheer and uncompromising. Their edges so sharp against the sky that ancient Chinese poets compared them to sword blades driven into the earth by giants. The comparison is not an exaggeration. Measured at its steepest faces, Huashan approaches a vertical incline that engineering manuals classify as a cliff, not a slope. The mountain's most notorious feature is the plank walk, a trail consisting of narrow wooden boards bolted directly into the rock face. Suspended hundreds of meters above the valley floor with nothing between the walker and open air. Climbers clip a safety harness to iron chains hammered into the granite and move sideways, board by board. Face pressed against stone, the valley, an almost abstract concept somewhere far below. What draws people here is precisely that confrontation, the point where fear becomes so complete that it transforms into something else entirely. Climbers consistently report that the terror peaks somewhere on the plank walk, holds for a long moment, and then dissolves into a clarity of focus unlike anything experienced at ground level. At the summit, looking out across a landscape that appears to exist below the clouds, that clarity feels less like achievement and more like return to something the body always knew but rarely gets to remember. That return to something ancient and essential finds its most suspended, most otherworldly expression on a mountain that appears to exist outside the normal rules of geography entirely. Fanjing Mountain in Guizhou Province presents a geological formation that seems less like a natural structure and more like something assembled by a civilization that no longer exists. The main summit splits into two separate stone pillars, each rising vertically from the mountain body, their peaks separated by a narrow ravine that drops away into cloud. A small stone bridge connects the two summits, and on each pillar, an ancient temple has stood for centuries, two sacred structures facing each other across an open sky. Linked by nothing wider than a few human steps. From below, when cloud fills the ravine between the pillars, the temples appear to float entirely free of the earth, islands of human devotion suspended in a white emptiness. That has no visible floor or ceiling. The mountain's lower slopes tell a different story, one of biological richness rather than geological drama. Fanjing sits within a national nature reserve containing forest ecosystems that have remained largely undisturbed for thousands of years. The Guizhou snub-nosed monkey, one of the world's most endangered primates, exists here and almost nowhere else on Earth. Ancient trees rise through multiple canopy layers, their root systems older than most recorded history. Two realities occupy the same mountain simultaneously, one reaching toward heaven in stone and devotion, the other pressing deep into the earth in root and ancient life, and neither diminishes the other. That union of heaven and earth, of ancient root and sacred stone, extends across China's western reaches into a landscape where legend and geology have become so deeply intertwined that separating them feels like a kind of loss. In Sichuan province, at the eastern edge of the Tibetan Plateau, 4 mountain peaks rise above the Changping Valley. In a formation that the local Tibetan people have never described in purely geological terms. The 4 summits, Sigunyang, meaning 4 Girls Mountain, are understood here as 4 sisters, young women of extraordinary beauty who gave their human forms to become permanent guardians of this valley and everyone who lives beneath them. The highest peak reaches 6,250 meters, permanently snow-covered, her white summit visible across distances that make the surrounding landscape feel scaled to a different world entirely. At dawn, when low-angle sunlight strikes the snowfields from the east, the 4 peaks shift through a sequence of colors, pale gold, then rose, then a deep amber before settling into the brilliant white that holds through the day. The transition takes less than 20 minutes and occurs every clear morning without exception, witnessed or not. Below the peaks, Changping Valley spreads across the mountain base in a display of biological generosity that contrasts completely with the severity above. Wildflower meadows cover the valley floor through summer months, blue gentian, yellow cinquefoil, purple aster interrupted by clear streams running directly from glacial melt. And stands of ancient pine, whose root systems have held this soil in place for centuries. The 4 sisters watch over all of it, as they always have, patient, permanent, and completely indifferent to whether anyone below remembers their names. Those 4 sisters, standing eternal over Changping Valley, offer one final reminder before this journey closes. that China's most extraordinary stories are not always written in human hands. Some were written by time itself, across scales that make human history feel brief. Zhangye Danxia in Gansu province presents what geologists classify as the most complete and visually dramatic example of colored sandstone landforms on Earth. Over 24 million years, alternating layers of red sandstone, mineral-rich sediment, and compressed earth accumulated in this basin under conditions that no longer exist anywhere in the region. Wind, rain, and freeze-thaw cycles then spent millions of additional years carving those compressed layers into the rolling, wave-like formations visible today. The result is a landscape that appears to have been painted rather than eroded. Bands of deep red, burnt orange, pale yellow, and soft green run horizontally across the hillsides in formations so regular they resemble brushstrokes. At sunrise and sunset, when low-angle light strikes the mineral surfaces directly, the colors intensify beyond what most cameras can accurately record. Photographers who have visited dozens of times report that no two visits produce the same palette. China is not one place. It is not one story, one landscape, one people, or one era. It is a world that contains multitudes, ancient rivers and modern bridges, sacred peaks and painted earth. Civilizations that rose and fell and left their marks in stone, water, and living memory. Every journey here ends the same way, not with the feeling of having seen enough, but with the quiet, certain knowledge that there is always something further in, always another layer beneath, always one more wonder waiting just beyond the next ridge.